Welcome back to another New Era edition of the SportsPro podcast. I'm your host, Elena Kouyoufa, and today we are exploring the role of senior female leaders, highlighting the immense value of the experiences and knowledge that women bring to the table. To do this, I'm joined by Kate Miller, the Chief Communications and Diversity Officer at the ECB, a really strong voice in this field. Our conversation explores the importance of having a strong internal compass and how that can create success. Kate also opens up about the challenges and expectations of striving to excel while undertaking the balancing act of parenthood and work. She offers heartfelt and practical advice for those navigating similar paths, as well as the power and importance of allyship. I left the conversation armed with wisdom, inspiration, and practical advice, and hopefully you will too. Hi, so I've got Kate Miller with me, Chief Communication Officer and Diversity, actually that may include Officer at the ECB, and our steering group member of New Era. You've been with us at SportsPro Live. How have your days been? Because you're day 2 now. You've been in panels and talks. Any key takeaways?
These events always strike me as always such a great energy around sport. You know, we're covering off so many topics here. We're talking about inclusion and diversity and technology and AI and, you know, big commercial discussions. And I even saw a brilliant piece of kit that can help manage elite sports teams. So just the whole commerce that's around sports always strikes me as being pretty fascinating and really eye-opening at these sorts of events.
Obviously, as part of New Era, we've tried to ensure there's bits and bobs around this event just to showcase what we're doing in terms of advocating for women and gender equality in the sports business industry. As you'll have seen, it's still quite a male-dominated industry. When you were asked kind of to join this program, what was your initial thinking? What drew you to it, basically?
It's a good question. I'm always a firm believer that it's our job as women in senior positions to make the ladder behind us as scalable as possible. And I hate the thought that my experience or knowledge that I've acquired, couldn't be used to good effect, really. I've had some interesting career experiences, often by being in a minority as a woman in sport. You always think, people won't really be bothered and people won't want to talk to me and they're not really going to be interested in hearing what I've got to say. And then you talk to people and you listen to them and then you realise just how powerful it is to share your experience or even a bit of guidance. So I'm also doing my coaching qualifications at the moment. And so I was particularly drawn to it to be able to use some of those skills. It's just very affirming as a process, really.
Yeah, that is actually something I did want to ask about, like the coaching qualifications and just that whole process. Because to be honest, through the Connect sessions, that was the first time I heard about them and what coaching actually is. So I'd be keen to find out more about what that process is like and maybe also what questions you have asked in the past to people who you've done that coaching with.
Again, great question. I mean, there's 2 ways of giving guidance, really. One is the more traditional route that everyone's familiar with, which is mentoring. Generally, as a person with more experience, you share anecdotes, stories, strategies from your experience, your lived experience, what's worked for you, what hasn't, to help guide another person's decision-making. And coaching comes from a much more intrinsic perspective, and it essentially starts with the premise that the individual probably has the right answers within them, probably more informed than mine as an external person could ever be, because I'm really sort of guessing what's going on in your head and what your life situation is at. And so coaching really provides you with the tools to be able to ask searching questions of an individual or a group of people to get them to think through solutions for themselves. So a good example might be, I don't know, if I told you to go and run 100 times up the stands here, we would have probably very different approaches as to how you might address that challenge. But you're probably more likely to know your physical strength, your endurance, your tenacity, your speed. So rather than me saying, right, we'll do it in blocks of 10, it might be that your idea is around doing it a completely different way. So I simplify it, but that's
takes basic. A bit of internal reflection, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah.
And where does someone go about like finding a coach, or how? Because oftentimes I think even if you look up someone, like what's the process in deciding this person is the one for me? Sometimes I suppose it comes from experience and talking to other people and them having had a good experience. But what would be the way, like if I wanted to go find a coach now, what would you recommend I do?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn's always a really good platform for finding coaches. There's 2 ways of doing it, really. It can be abroad, someone who coaches across sort of multidisciplinary. It can be someone that is far more specific in what they want to coach people in. So there's things like giving up drinking coaches. If you're someone who obviously not struggling with alcohol problems, but might be someone who wants to create some lifestyle changes, and there's coaches that are really experienced in guiding people in how to cut alcohol from their life. There's fertility coaches for people that are on a journey around infertility or wanting to start a family. Maternity coaches, so people coming back to work often take on a maternity coach. My real, and again, my new era was such a positive thing for me, is I firmly believe that there's a layer they call the marzipan layer in the workforce. Essentially the layer below the top layer, the icing on the cake, as it were, that sits just beneath. So they're not the cake, then sort of general workforce, they're, middle and upper management. And for women, they're often the step up to becoming the icing on the cake. The C-suite level or the top operators is often the hardest step of all. So I feel quite focused and quite empowered to support what they frame as the marzipan layer and helping more women get up into more senior positions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with New Era, we definitely have tried to take a more holistic approach, because there are mentorship programs out there. Sometimes they are more focused on a sport or a more specific niche in the industry. So I think what we have achieved is being able to have those conversations that aren't focused on a specific component of the sports business industry. And I'll say from the Connect sessions we've done, like you've also spoken on your experience as being a mother and coming back to work. So I think from discussions you've had with mentees and so on, like what values have you taken or lessons that you transcend into your work?
I feel very guided by my kind of internal compass, my internal values. It makes decision making quite easy because I believe in my values, and I think I have good, strong moral values, and it means that I don't doubt myself or much. Sometimes, still human, but I don't doubt myself much because, the reason I work in sport is I want to throw open sports doors. I believe in the power of sport, its ability to do good, to create social change. I think if you stand by what your values are, whatever they might be, it makes decision-making much cleaner for you. It makes the agonizing around decision-making a lot easier. And it means that you can create strong teams with good outcomes. So I think that's probably my main learning. And that's what I've tried to impart with people I'm working with as part of New Era, is to really be clear on what your values are and make sure that they are your kind of North Star in what you do.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really important. As you said, it guides you through personal and professional stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think earlier in your session that I was in, obviously you've discussed about grassroots work quite a lot. How do you envision women's roles in the sports business industry in the next few years?
I still think it's a hard battle. I'd love to say that numbers would increase significantly. I think they will go up. I still think as women, there is an extraordinary struggle in motherhood and work, and I don't have the answers, and I have not managed to work out the kind of perfect formula of juggling it all. I think in the UK, I know that other countries are much further ahead than us, but I think any industry, particularly one that is quite male-dominated, is going to continue to struggle until that issue, that crisis really has been resolved. It's incredibly hard, the emotional side of wanting to be the best in both worlds and do right by my team and, deliver for my boss, and then be home for bedtime or juggle my daughter and be there for all of those key milestones, and is an incredibly hard ask on any woman. And that's not to say there aren't any other challenges. We've got aging populations and parents that we'll need to take care of as well. Lots of people have furry babies, and they come with their own challenges as well. If you've got a pet in your life that is significantly important to you. So I was a bit of a meandering answer, sorry, but...
No, it's great points you mentioned. And I think it's really important to hear from women at different stages in their life and different lived experiences, because obviously, like, for example, I've not lived what it means to be a mother. Like, we all have, our mother, and we've seen stuff, and maybe as we grow older, we reflect and are more appreciative of stuff they have juggled, because we see that it's not as easy as we thought when we were kids, when they were running around to make sure we go to sports and make sure we do our after school activities and everything. And I only appreciate these things now, realizing how hard it is. But yeah, I think we were actually having a discussion with some of the class members when they mentioned about, like, even reviews and feedback you get from your company, like these formal reviews. And one of them actually mentioned that they asked for it to be adjusted like 2 weeks later because it was around their menstrual cycle and they were more emotional. And it's something sometimes you don't even think about as a woman. And sometimes we are expected to have all the answers, and every woman's experience is so different. So I think being able to listen, because it's not just about men listening to us, it's also women listening to women and their different experiences. So I think it's definitely really, really important to try and consider these things and then bring them up, because now that I've heard that, I will definitely speak about it, at least to someone I feel comfortable in the company, be like, look, this is something other people are taking into account. How can we maybe do that? So I think it's really interesting.
Really brave. So brave. Yeah. What a brave thing to do. I really admire that.
I think to what you mentioned before in your session, like not everyone can be a role model, but how do you be a good ally? So I'd like your take on that. Like, what can people do to be good allies?
Oh, I love this question. I have known some brilliant kick-ass men that have really supported women, and it's such a joy to see when men open their eyes at the inequities that women face and they are honest about it. And then they put their energy behind levelling the playing field for everybody. It is really a joy to behold. Be that man that makes women proud to work with you. Doesn't matter if you haven't got daughters. You don't need to be a great ally just because you've got a daughter. You've all got mums or sisters or... Join in. This needs to be a unified movement, not just for women, but for people of colour and people with disabilities and people from lower socioeconomic groups. The world is not equal. And the more that all of us get aboard trying to give opportunity to everybody, the better the world will be. And you don't need to do a lot. You do as much as you can. Be the person that recognises that someone's not doing so well. Be the person that recognises that a mum's getting a bit twitchy because she's panicking if she's going to get her train home to pick her kids up from school. Or a dad, a mum or a dad. Be the guy that checks in and invites someone on maternity leave to the Christmas party so that they don't get left out. Like, it doesn't need to be big. It doesn't need to be hugely strategic. It just needs to be inclusive. And it's such a powerful thing when we get it right.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll say some of the most influential people in my life have been men. For example, when I always went to an international school in Greece and we had a Scottish PE teacher and we never had a girls' football club. And he decided, he's like, do you want to come and train with the boys team? I was like, yeah, sure. And I started in year 4. And ever since I played football, I played for first league clubs in Greece. And it was amazing. And I'll forever be grateful for that opportunity. And then we ended up having girls teams and women's team and everything. And yeah, that's something that has shaped my passion for sport and everything. So I think a lot of people fear this divide between men and women, but we're all in it together, and that's where great results come from. So yeah, definitely I think being able to be a good ally is equally as important as being a good role model.
And just a spark of inclusion there, where you say a man identified that there was something not equitable there and created a spark and a bit of a movement, and things snowball as a consequence of it. A former CEO of mine had 3 daughters and a very strong wife and was a huge advocate for women and pushed me really hard in my career at times when I completely doubted myself. And he told me I'd get on with it and get the job done, and I believe in you. And that was very, very powerful. I have enjoyed working with some incredibly talented and kind and decent men, and they exist everywhere. You know, lots of them, I think, just need to know what to do a lot of the time.
My thinking around is, obviously you're in a leadership position, like you've got a lot of people around you, people that report into you. There was a comment made earlier about if a woman is more emotional, is that because they're not rational, or is it actually because they're strong and understanding? And I think that was something really nice to reflect upon. And I'd be keen to hear about what your leadership style is, and has that changed over the years that you've been in the industry?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Yes, it's changed a lot. As a younger leader, I was hugely micromanaging. Something happened to me whereby my boss's PA accidentally sent non-anonymized feedback to me in its full Technicolor glory, which was a kind of 360. And I received a kind of dump of feedback about my performance as a leader. And some of it was very stark. And I had a bit of a cry, and I read through it. And then I realized much of it was true and fair. And weirdly, demonstrates the importance of feedback. But from then I removed some of the micromanaging, and I, gave more permissions to people. And actually I feel like I like to aid development. I let people, mistakes ultimately always lead to learning. So I try not to micromanage too much, and I try not to hover over people, and I try and run teams with trust. I'm incredibly grateful to my amazing team at work. It's the best team I've ever had. And they're talented and committed and passionate. And if you build the right team around you with a group of people who are far more able than you, quite frankly, you just have to nurture and let them fly. That's really is our job as leaders. Create a good culture, try and be open, spark creativity and curiosity. And for me, people that come into sport and want to work in sport do so because they really believe in the power and good of sport. So it's not difficult to harness, really.
Yeah, I think, as you said, it's probably the most important thing in a leader, but also I would say the most challenging thing to be able to let your team flourish and to grow. And just to wrap things up, obviously you spoke about your partnership with Chance to Shine, and obviously you've been involved in New Era. How are all these different partnerships that advocate for participation, whether that's male, female, just to showcase equality, equity, representation, advocacy, all these different elements, how important are those to you?
Hugely so. I mean, what we often look at is there's a systemic issue around inclusion. Society is not built to be inclusive yet. And sport is not built to be inclusive. Most sports are built to be male by design. And when women come along, they're viewed as like not as good, smaller men, and when reality, actually, when you deconstruct the arguments around sport, if you look at women's tennis and women's football and women's cricket now, we're getting to that space. It's being viewed as being played in a different way. The women's version is a different version to the men, not a lesser version. So I think role modelling, and I've got excited and now I've bashed the microphone. Role modelling and deconstructing some of the sort of traditional arguments around sports really important. Partners help us do that brilliantly. Partners open doors. They help us build trust with communities where trust has been lost. If you look at cricket in the Black community, we've a long way to go with a community that's been disenfranchised with cricket for a generation, really. And likewise, the South Asian community. So that's what our partners do. They help us repair wounds, they help us foster trust again, and they deliver programs that we know are creating immense change and opportunity for many.
Brilliant. Well, I'd like to thank you very much for this discussion, which was really insightful, but also for your contributions to New Era, which are important for everyone, whether it's the people in the class or the wider community. So thank you so much.
Such a pleasure. Thank you.